In this episode, we're talking with Ray Chua, a buyer's agent from Perth. We're going to reveal his insider's view on rising property values there and what's been driving the market, and why he thinks that the data we're told to rely on has been proven to be wrong. Are investors overconfident about the Perth recovery story? Are those buying in now on the crest of a huge wave or about to be dumped?
Welcome to The Elephant in the Room. This is the podcast where we love to talk about the big things in property that never usually get talked about. I'm Veronica Morgan, real estate agent, buyer's agent and buyer's agent mentor, co-host of Foxtel's Location Australia, author of Auction Ready and co-host of Your First Home Buyer Guide.
And I'm Chris Bates, mortgage broker, recently ranked number 5 in Australia out of over 18,000 brokers in the annual MPA Top 100 Mortgage Broker Awards. Before we get started, I need to let you know that nothing we say here can be taken as personal advice. We always recommend you engage the services of an appropriate and experienced professional.
Our guest today is Ray Chua, and Ray has been a buyer's agent for over 15 years, moving into the role following a 3-year sales stint as a sales agent, and before that, qualifying to be a mechatronics engineer. And Ray, feel free to explain that in a moment. He's an active investor himself and over the years has personally engaged in various projects, including renovation, subdivision and development. His latest achievement includes overseeing the entire process of a triplex development in a north coastal suburb of Perth and personally buying over 500 properties for clients. Having witnessed market fluctuations post the mining boom, Ray has launched his own buyer's agency called Buyers Advocate Perth, specialising in securing what he calls outstanding investment-grade assets for his clients that stand resilient during downturns and fuel remarkable growth. We're quite keen to learn about that. Now, Ray has also assisted numerous home buyers purchase their dream family home in Perth. Now, he prides himself on his analytical approach to property, no doubt a legacy of his engineering background. So we're looking forward to digging deep on what's happening in Perth. Welcome, Ray. Tell us, before we talk property, what is a mechatronics engineer?
That's a mouthful, isn't it? It's two disciplines combined, mechanical engineering and electronic. And I was, I guess, the second year of that batch where they first introduced the course at Curtin University. And it was fun. I got into it thinking robotics, but as a mechatronic engineer, we hate the fact that machines imitate humans. It doesn't have to work properly. It's very much a discipline where it's automation and subsystems working together.
Yeah, I mean, I do love that. A lot of people in buyer's agency, I mean, you're one of the, like I said, the dinosaurs of the buyer's agency industry. Like, someone who's been doing it more than 1 or 2 years, which is going to be a lot of that. But I also think, I love how there's a background of a lot of buyer's agents that come into the industry and, a process and analytical approach is a very important, I think, when you're weighing up different options for clients. And so I can see how that skill set can morph into great buyer's agency. Ray, I mean, one of the reasons we asked you to come on is, you've been around the traps for a long time. Perth's become all in the vogue in the last couple of years. And a lot of people probably never been Perth 3 years ago, and they're buying there for clients now. And, they haven't gone through the boom and then the bust and then the years of no growth and having to manufacture growth and, and then seeing what really collapsed and what the locals want. So it'd be really enlightening, because it is such a key word, Perth, thrown around in the property investment circles right now. Just talking through, like, if you don't mind, I know it's a big question, like the longer term history, even if you go back to the doubling in prices in 2 or 3 years, and then what's happened over the last 15, 20 years and, how the recent, 12, 18 months has gone.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. It is a bit of a roller coaster. And so Perth had its mining boom, 2006, and had mining boom Mark II up to 2014. But really that 2004 to 6 period, we eclipsed Sydney prices, and that was, headline news and all. And but the funny thing is right now, all the metrics are even stronger than that period of time in terms of, for example, the transactions are even more at the moment. But certainly I got into the industry as a sales agent at that time, and it was a crazy time to be a selling agent. And I would see people write offers right after viewing on the letterbox, writing the offer and offers over offers. So it was very much a boom period. And suddenly it was fueled by mining, no doubt, and construction. And a lot of people came to the city for that. And when they left, that's when the big downturn happened. And so Perth has had and probably still has a reputation of being a boom bust type of city. But from where I sit and from working on the ground, it's certainly gone past and consolidated, matured, and it's certainly looking more and more sustainable. So yeah, it
but
was.
What happened in that? That we're talking like, what is it? 2006, right, to 2023, right? Like it's a long time. What happened all over those years? Because it's not a pretty story for different parts of the market, right? Like and how as a buyer's agent were you able to still navigate that? Because you've been pretty patient to stay in the industry when it hasn't been growing, right? It's hard pitch when prices aren't going up. So tell us how people in Perth have been able to weather that storm and manufacture property returns in that period.
Yeah, so it's certainly not it's not the happiest story, I guess, for a lot of people, but certainly timing speaks volumes. So I was one of the lucky ones. For example, I bought my properties in 2003 and 4. So if you caught that boom, you're on easy street, right? You can do a lot with the equity. And so to navigate that, it's really, I guess, the city is growing organically. And so you have to remember there's always the more desirable part of the city where everyone wants to live. And so the business was predominantly probably 95% investors, started off that way. And because of the nature of the investment market, it was definitely more skewed to owner-occupiers during the tough times. And so we were helping a lot of home buyers more so than investors in the hardest times in Perth, I guess. And we were recommending investing in Brisbane, of all places. So at one stage where we're not afraid to say there are better growth opportunities in other states. And so I guess if people want Perth, that we do our best and guide them. But certainly we also have to give our advice. For example, there was a lot of examples where people wanted mining town investments, and we at that time advised against that. But unfortunately, some people still get lured by the high yields and quick bucks, and they jumped in only to really regret it. And it's certainly it's disastrous in terms of changing their life. So, but whereas the good properties, if you just look at them, the median trends, it might tell a story of no growth. But actually, if you look deeper into the good areas that everyone wants to be, the aspirational areas, they've actually done a lot better than the averages. So that speaks volumes to doing the research and buying in the right place. Chris, you mentioned adding value. Certainly, turning apples into apple pie, finding that development site and creating more assets for the market to rent or resell. That's definitely a strategy that we had to help clients with, but also renovate to add value and add that wow factor. So there was still a lot of successes around the active strategies during a flat market.
I think that's one of the things that opportunities, I guess, that is there in a flat market. When prices start to rise and FOMO starts kicking in, then you'll see that differential between an unrenovated property and the renovated equivalent, if you like, or the same size, same location, same block of land. The difference in price becomes negligible as those who are desperate to get into a market will push themselves up on the unrenovated properties. And so certainly when things become very, very flat, those unrenovated properties become very unappealing, because why would you bother? Why would you go through all of that if you could actually buy something renovated for not a lot more? So their prices do fall on unrenovated. You mentioned also earlier about, the owner-occupier appeal, and obviously understanding granular what's going on in a market in a granular sense. And certainly when we look at aggregated data for an entire city, it doesn't take into account there are certain locations that are vastly more desirable than others and will have different different patterns in terms of price movements. But that said, if you compare to an aspirational suburb in Perth compared to one in Brisbane or Melbourne and Adelaide even or Sydney over the same period of time, the growth rates were markedly lower. They might have been better than the rest of Perth as a whole, but, the whole city was dragging down those areas. I'm curious, though, because you did mention that Perth is now sort of consolidated and matured as a city. So how has it changed from being just a big mining town?
Yeah, great question. It's always been known as everything closes at 5, a bit of a sleepy town. And if you haven't been to Perth or been a while since you've been, then that's the perception you'll probably have. But certainly, it's got a real buzz about it right now. There's so many events and things happening all around the city, not just in the city, but neighbourhood events as well. A lot of infrastructure that has happened and, partly COVID stimulated, but also lifestyle driven. And so we're on the well stage for a lot of things, Optus Stadium and, there's new museums, for example. But there's a lot in the pipeline as well that's about to really bring people to the city and actually live in the city and stay in the city and visit the city. So I can ream up a few infrastructure, points if you like. But certainly it's...
I'm sort of more curious if what's been the primary industry and employer and where most of the money has come from is the resources sector. The fact that you've got that infrastructure and going on, I mean, that in itself, construction as well has always been underpinning Perth's property movements or fluctuations. Are there different industries that are bringing employment to the state and to the city? Or is it that the mining sector is going through a more prosperous phase and so therefore there's a market for all this stuff, in which case it's still a mining town?
Yeah, definitely. I hear you. And we're proud of what we're good at, and we're never going to deny that mining's our thing. So we're certainly very much correlated to that sector. However, it's not really a one-trick pony in a number of ways. Firstly, the type of minerals. There's a lot of diversity there: gold, nickel, LNG, iron ore, obviously, but also the way of the future. Lithium, critical minerals, the solar, wind, everything's here. And so the idea that our boom is on the back of just the resources and energy might be that might be tapering out. It's here actually for a long time. So really, the other industries, I had a look at this. I've got the chart up actually, and the biggest employer at the moment in Perth is healthcare with 91,000 people. And then the professional sector is 58,200 people. Construction industries in third place at 57,200 people. Mining's in fourth place, employing 50,400 people. And retail trade is equal fourth, around that 50,000 mark. And so those 5 sectors, it does make up half of our employment. But there's a growing industry like agriculture and education and the like that's still sort of hitting its ranks at the moment.
Ray, I mean, we're doing an episode after this, just coincidentally, with an expat specialist. And, have you seen a lot of, due to affordability, right? Well, I can think of friends from London that have moved back to Perth. Whether it's the lifestyle move because of the kids, or they can't move to the East Coast, or they're, are you finding that maybe that brain drain is now looping back into the Perth, and then once some family members or friends move back, that also encourages them to move back? So a lot of and that's intergenerational wealth, and they want to be where they grew up. So you're finding this pressure cooker of people around the world, which are from Perth, driving Perth.
Yes, so I do think that the jobs is the main driver. So whether it's people from Perth or otherwise, jobs is the key. And our market's always not really driven by interest rates; it's always driven by economic strength and jobs. And so this is the main driver, I feel. And yes, anecdotally, we've got good inquiry from people from overseas, but it's job related. It's they're here for work. That's really the key.
You sent us some information prior to this chat that suggested that Corelogic had their Perth housing data wrong. So can you tell us some more about why you thought that?
Look, I guess this is more talking broadly to the media, not just Corelogic, but in general, the media says a lot of things which affects the sentiment of our market. And so, for example, is Perth just a mining town? That's a very common statement that we hear from East Coast companies that promote property in the East Coast. And so that sort of definitely becomes a prominent thing. And, there's a lot of talk on short-term growth, what's going to happen in 1 year or what happened last year. But obviously that serves no one in terms of long-term investors. Really, you should be looking at long-term data. And the Corelogic thing was more so we're on the ground. We know how strong the market is in some areas. Yet every time we look at the monthly report on Corelogic, it's dismal. It's negative or a very small amount. And so we had our concerns. Perth was showing really robust growth in our point of view, and when we look at the other supplier of data, like in WA, it's REWA, we can clearly see discrepancies. So we decided to submit some of this REWA data to Corelogic, and they did pause their reporting on Perth to investigate the divergence in the housing market measurements for Perth, and subsequently they did adjust their figures. So again, I'm not sure whether it's the hedonic indicator not working properly in Perth or something of that nature, but some people suspect is it the stakeholders of Corelogic that are more East Coast based. So who knows?
Things like that don't exist in this world, Ray. It's always, if everyone's really weird. No way. I mean, it's the fight to quality though, isn't it? What a Cottesloe or a Subiaco or, and the housing market versus the apartment versus the house and land on the fringes versus the new builds up the coast or down the coast. I mean, you sort of enlighten to what are the issues it's very obvious here on the East Coast, to be honest. East Coast buyers agents, new buyers agents that have no idea about the history of Perth. Because how do you know the history of Perth? How do you know what locals want in Perth if you haven't been in that market for 15, 20 years? You were helping people buy properties in Perth when people didn't really want to buy. They were buying not because of price growth. They were buying because they wanted security and lifestyle. And, and what the locals want is really, new people moving to the city is great. But what locals want, really, that's what drives prices, particularly the ones who are more affluent. So Ray, what's your take on this? Because you are seeing a lot of buyers agents in the market and they're going up and down the coast. They're going to the fringes and buying big blocks of land. And the issues with this, particularly because we're seeing on the East Coast a retraction back to the city. Buyers don't want to make those big lifestyle an hour away from the city or 2 hours. They want to be close to the action because return to work's, getting stronger and stronger. How are you seeing things play out, and how, without trying to pinpoint different buyers agents, but the mistakes East Coast, buyers agents jumping off planes are making in the Perth market? Yeah,
great point. I guess we are seeing a proliferation of East Coast buyers agents, that's for sure, on the ground. And, we talk to our selling agent contacts from time to time, and they report how shocking the price that they would pay for certain properties. And so when that happens, you got to wonder. And following, the where they are buying, and the classic is kind of the Rockingham type of area where no doubt there's pockets of where it's really nice. It's just I think they compare it to a similar coastal type of location over east where it's fringe commutable. However, it's an easy sell. It's under 500,000, high yield, right near the beach. But I've knowing the area, I guess it's not an area that I would take my clients. And so it's really, I wonder if they've looked at I guess the demographics, the affordability ratios, income to house price, income to rents, because yield is one thing. If people can't afford to keep paying more, that's the other thing, isn't it? and the supply is a big one down there. So we can access state lot activity just to have a look at how many lots are for sale or coming up. That kind of metrics is critical. Future supply is the enemy of growth, so we avoid that region for supply concerns as well. Because if you're 3 minutes from the town centre compared to 5 minutes, it's not much difference. And we're looking at the rental density and all the other unemployment stats, socioeconomic stats, and it just doesn't stack up in my books. I've certainly bought only a handful there for people who want to live there in the best parts of the area. So we have we have dealings down that way, but not many. But certainly, I'll try to steer my clients to better locations.
Right. Sounds like you don't need to steer them, to be honest. What a great line that was. Future supply is the enemy of growth. I might put that in my property. My property playbook. So this is what a good point, right? So you're saying that typically the more affluent, and why that matters is that that's usually they are buying lifestyle. They've got bigger budget. They've got potentially more intergenerational wealth, and that's just the reality of inequality. And they usually got the biggest earning increases in the future, and so they also want to buy forever homes, and they usually these are forever suburbs as well. So there's less turnover in these suburbs. So typically, though, in that downturn, though, over those years, like people wouldn't move to Rockingham, right? They would want to stay close to the city. They'd want to stay in a more established suburb with parklands and close to the schools and the city and the beach, and that's ideally what that type of buyer really wants to achieve is that type of lifestyle. Would you agree with that? And is that what your trends over the longer term would show?
Yeah, that's right. So certainly the desirable areas we're finding. I guess that's the premise of investing in property. Where will it grow? And you're exactly right. It's driven by if people are earning more, they can pay more, but also intergenerational wealth where there's inheritances and windfalls and the like. And look, certainly there's still some lifestyle drivers for an area like Rockingham. So we're not dismissing that, but I guess the question is it the top 20% of wealthiest Australians wanting to live there? And so that's more. I guess if you're looking for an alternative because of budget. We would probably take you to the next suburb along or a smaller dwelling in those locations rather than taking you to the areas that aren't demonstrating those investment grade factors.
What you're touching on there is something that I hear, and I'm sure Chris hears across the country, and in that certain areas become attractive to investors who are looking for affordable options to invest. And so the idea of investing in affordability, they really should be in two separate sentences because often they lead people to buy poor quality investments. And Brisbane buyers agents have been complaining about this for years, about the flood of southern states buyers agents. And of course, increasingly, Chris mentioned Eastern States buyers agents getting off the plane, but increasingly we're hearing stories of people that don't even bother getting on a plane. And, they're relying either on what they see online themselves or Street View or I've heard, property managers. What could go wrong? And I've actually spoken to some property managers in Perth because I've been curious about this, and I've heard some horror stories. And from their own mouths, they've said to me, "Oh, look, I don't know what makes a good investment. I just know what rents well, and and if I think that that's a good one, I'd like to manage, then of course I'm going to tell them they should buy it." And they're not telling me that because they're saying, "Oh, I'm just telling them anything they want to hear." They're actually just saying that that's in their own best endeavors, that's what they're doing. And I know that that's not enough, right? So are you finding that as an established buyer's agent in the area, are you locking horns with some of these buyers, or are you finding that they really don't know how to identify good areas and good property, and so therefore you very rarely come across them?
Yeah, great point. Look, I do see some from time to time, but certainly it's a real concern of the industry. So I'm part of the REWA Buyers Agency Committee. And so we, as an industry group, we do talk a little bit about, the fact that people are coming in, how qualified they are to represent their clients, because it's, we've even heard disturbingly reports surface about buyers agents from the East Coast reaching out to selling agents and through generic Gmail accounts, and they don't even have any licensing details or office details. So in these instances, what if they just close their Gmail account? There's absolutely no trace of their involvement. And so what happens if they didn't convey a certain important point about a property? That's the misrepresentation that we're worried about. And we're concerned that these mishandled transactions, this lack of accountability, the system needs to be more robust. Right now, the mutual recognition, you can just come in without any experience in doing any transactions in Perth. Whereas as a licensed agent, you need to be under a licensee for 2 years before a licensed agent can actually practice. So at least you've got, that support and experience behind you. So yeah, it's real concerning in terms of the safeguards, and that's really the importance as an experienced buyer's agent. We emphasize due diligence, understanding of local practices, and we want to safeguard consumers against non-local representation.
I'm on a personal mission to help more people make better property decisions. And you can find out all about what I'm working on at veronicamorgan.com.au. And there you'll find resources for first home buyers, details about my buyer's agent mentoring program, access to suburb help for investors, or if you're looking to buy your dream home or an investment property in Sydney's inner west, eastern suburbs or lower North Shore, you can connect with my team at Good Deeds Property Buyers.
If you're thinking about buying your first home, upgrading to a new one, or purchasing an investment property anywhere in Australia, we would love to carefully guide you through this journey and importantly get the finance right. Please reach out via our website, wealthful.com.au.
Don't forget that you can download our free full or forecaster report. Which experts can you trust to get it right? theelephantintheroom.com.au.
Right. I mean, you can't say it any better than that. I mean, it is a concern, and it's a concern for us who, even this week I saw a client that, got completely stitched up in the new build space, and the whole rent vesting and the depreciation. And luckily we stopped him buying another one, but he's got to get out of some, townhouse in Gympie or something like that. It's they were trying to buy another house in Western Sydney. It's so we see it. We see all the pain that people have made bad mistakes. I think it's going to come out. So we talk about like a high yield, low affordability part of the market that, these buyers agents are playing. What other mistakes they make? And I imagine they're trying to do some land banking in outer suburbs as well, like where, at some point I'll knock it down and do a townhouse development, but it's 25 k's in the city. I imagine people will also, and maybe even go, hopefully not, but hopefully they're not falling for off the plan and, new builds over there. But, I guess they'd still be happening a bit. But what other mistakes are they making?
Look, it's really just going for, it's an easy sell, right? Get positive cash flow for, $400,000, get positive cash flow. So it is that, it's so easy to sell. If everything was that easy, I'd be doing it. But it's really, I feel like I'm doing the wrong thing if I ever did that. So, the areas that they're taking their clients, I just had a look just now. I couldn't see where would I put my client. Is there a better part of that suburb? And I can't hand on heart say yes. So it's really worrying. But I don't think, I think people who are more and more educated about the, castle land packages and brand new, I think those are still more owner-occupier driven, first-time buyer driven.
So how's your inquiry? So in your business, what's the inquiry like? I mean, obviously, we know a lot of DIY investors are, doing it themselves, DIY, of course, and I know the investor forums are full of people talking about Perth, and often spruiking their success stories and the instant equity gains and all that sort of stuff. We know that there are fly in, fly out or borderless buyers agents buying over there, whether they get on a plane or whether they don't get on a plane. Are people who are outside Perth or potentially Perthians, is that what you call the locals there, Are you getting increased inquiry for people who want to invest in Perth? Is it basically creating a bit of a frenzy, generally speaking?
Yeah, for sure. And so, look, I don't know if I mentioned, but I just launched this business after a strong 15-year career, and it's been a good time to launch a business because you always worry whether the phone will ring, but right now it hasn't been a problem. So the front end or the inquiry is strong. It is still a combination of investors and home buyers. However, there's a marked increase in East Coast buyers. I want to buy in Perth, and so that is quite a common situation. Again, their budgets are, they think Perth, they think 500,000. It's a little bit unrealistic because look, the median house price in Perth, according to Rewa, is $575. By Corelogic, it's $660,000, and so really, if we're trying to get better than average, we really need a bit more than the median, right?
Yeah.
So I do believe the Rewa median is very clinical and it's really the middle number, whereas the Corelogic one is hedonic and it's probably hugs closer to the truth. So 660, we're sort of saying to clients, it's got to be that and above.
But given all that activity from investors, what would be the signs then that the market could be overheated? Because I guess that to me says that you're not dealing with fundamental local demand.
Look, I wouldn't. I guess if you look at the borrowing numbers, how many percent owners and how many percent are investors, it's still at a healthy level. It's not overheated from that point of view. I wouldn't say we're at a dizzying heights of investment. And so, that's another thing that I guess there's proliferation of media saying, Perth is peaked. Whereas if you compare our growth or compared to our previous peaks, that kind of thing, it's really just started. It's got a long way to go to catch up to what the East Coast markets have done. Especially after such a long, prolonged consolidation, there's a good chance that the coming years, not just 1 year, not just 2 years, I'm talking 5, 10 years, could be quite healthy for Perth. Again, we see no signs of slowdown, mainly because of the supply constraints, but certainly the very moment, the demand is very, very strong.
I imagine there's going to be a bit of debt created in the Perth market, and as in people, there was never, even though there was desire to upgrade, there was never urgency to do it because you were worried about the suburb running on you. So, I'll upgrade when I get to that stage of life, right? Because I don't need a bigger mortgage now. Like I don't need that space. But what then drives it is actually no, I need to lock that in because if I don't do it now, I won't do it. And I imagine you'd find that with price growth, you're starting to see people take on debt earlier than they need to, and be willing to lock it in because of if they don't do it now, they're worried that they won't be able to get there for high school. And so people are in that sort of that transaction, then that person sells and then that person upgrades. And so you create these more steam in the market, particularly in these owner-occupier markets. Ray, you kindly took me on a car drive around. I think it would have been 2013, 14 or something. I can't remember when it was. And, we went on a bit of a, you were very kind. You took me to where the Cottesloe or the Subiacos, but we also went on the south side of the river and things like that. With this borrowing capacity restraint, where people would love to be in those suburbs, but, even just because of the bank's borrowing capacities, are you finding, though, that there is some really good growth in the bridesmaid suburbs and the suburbs that people didn't really want to go to before, but they know that it's very similar to the suburbs they want to be, but it's actually just all that's affordable now because of borrowing capacities?
Yeah, no doubt. That's definitely a big change and trend. So it's a good thing because, these areas have been quite sleepy for a long time as well. So it's good that that's happening. But no doubt when it was more affordable and people can borrow more, there were more transactions in the premium suburbs. But of course, with the borrowing capacities diminished and price growth, it is very much the bridesmaid suburbs that are having their time in the sun at the moment, and we're loving it because it's a good price point. You're still getting into great areas that represent great value, but also amenity lifestyle. So I don't know if you want me to ream some suburbs off, but the Victons, still Riverside, for under 1.2, Duncraig, around $1 million, Karrinyup, these kind of areas are near or next door to the really affluent areas, but they still represent a fantastic opportunity for people to come in and have a great lifestyle. And we talked about owner-occupier appeal. If you're an investor, I would actually encourage these type of investments as well, because it's the future home buyer that's going to pay more for these type of products. But I understand not everyone has that amount to invest, but that's a big mistake we see all the time. People splitting their budget, trying to get a couple of smaller ones.
I guess the thing too is that if you've got that amount of money to invest, then, you might look to other cities where you think, it might be a bit of a surer bet, because, Perth hasn't done very well over the last decade, let's face it. And we are familiar, you sort of alluded to this earlier, we're familiar with the concept of revision to mean, right? Where Perth price could be expected to play catch up over the next decade and potentially outperform the eastern capitals. But I'm still not completely convinced that that's necessarily just a fait accompli, that has to happen because, theoretically it should. What do you think would need to happen for that to occur?
Look, I guess it's still the fundamentals of population growth. That's a big one. So people want to be here, that we have to house more people, and the trends are economic trends. So I'm no economist, but certainly that's the bigger picture that's really driving it. But I think also coming onto the world stage, becoming a world-class city, being in the same time zone as Asia type of thing. So people are landing in Perth rather than East Coast. So these are I think the big picture plays that has to happen. Big one would be we're very, very good at digging stuff out of the ground. But I think we could get better at adding value to that, manufacturing it here. So that's a real challenge for the city. And I think that's an area, if we can get better at that, it's going to do really well.
I mean, it's chicken and egg, isn't it? You get more people, then you need more services. You get more service, then you need, so I kind of feel like that it's been held back because, but once population growth, and I mean, from affordability point of view, it is, a better option for some people who can't afford to stay in, the East Coast, for example. And then more jobs open up because more businesses open up. And I think that, but also from the expat market, it is closer to Asia. It is closer to Europe, right? Bali, etc. So, I mean, I think there's there is a big contingent there from around the world in Perth, isn't there? There's, a lot of people do have that as a preference as a city because it is a bit closer to their family overseas.
That's correct. And, the most livable cities rankings, I know top 10's always advertised and Sydney, Melbourne's up there, second, and third and fourth. But if you look at top 20, Perth is, I think, 13th. Above Brisbane. I think Brisbane is 16th or something like that. So look, I'm not sure if that says much, but it's, the livability is very strong. And if we just improved one component of that measure, I think it was the arts, then we would be in the top 5.
It's funny though, isn't it? Because Perth, it is almost like a different country. We've, got the time zone difference, you've got a huge distance and quite a long flight to get there from the East Coast to Perth. And so I know that myself, it's a long time since I've been to Perth, and there's lots of other places that are a shorter plane ride too that I'll go if I'm going to go for a holiday, for argument's sake. And so I think that the dynamic and the attraction, for people to sort of polarize on one side of the country to the other as a consequence of that, you'd need to almost have a history in Perth, or like Chris was saying, you're connected somewhere else. And so therefore that makes it really attractive. I think, I think it's obviously going to be an interesting market to watch, because when you look at our top capital cities in this country, and you've got Perth median house price, which is way below that of some of our regional cities, and that in itself is rather unusual, I guess. But I also struggle with this concept that just because it's performing or has performed in that way that surely it's got to catch up at some point. I'm still struggling with that. I'm not convinced necessarily that everything's in place for that necessarily to come across. And I think it's interesting too, because it appears to be that Perth is very much in favour with investors in a climate where investors are selling up and actually not having a huge amount of confidence. So it's sort of interesting to think that that's what's happening in the country. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to recall that at some point in the last 10 years, the vacancy rates in Perth were in the double digits. Now, do I have that correct, or do I have it wrong?
7% was our highest, really. So
right.
in
Not double.
2019, almost double.
Yeah.
But certainly under 1% or under 0.5% now, it's critical. So huge difference, stark difference.
But that's the situation across the country, and that's a bit of a problem, because when you're trying to sort of look at any particular location and say, well, population growth, a shortage of accommodation, those two elements combined are going to contribute to on long-term property performance, then that's not unique to any area in this country at the moment. So I guess that's a danger with sort of looking to any location and saying, oh, this is great, because even though, and some of our economists are saying that situation is, well, that certainly the shortage of accommodation is going to take a good decade to get us out of it. What happens when we get to the end of that decade? So I think that's something to bear in mind. Do you feel that particularly, are you feeling the rental crisis over there in the same way we're certainly feeling it over here?
It's pretty bad. I think it's the worst in the country. And so I really feel sorry for the tenants. However, it's really that's the state of play, and it's getting to a stage where families are house sharing. I'm talking to people that they're sort of under a bit of time pressure to get out. Yeah. So I'm helping them. But yeah, it's pretty dire out there, and hundreds of people lining up for rental. That's like a lottery, right? So are you going to get it or not?
Yeah,
you're a good
awful.
tenant. So it's not great news, but hopefully, the light at the end of the tunnel, I'm hoping, is all the building stimulus that has happened. They're all finished, and people move out of their rentals to get into their new home. Fingers crossed that helps relieve a few rental properties.
So with that home build over WA was next level, right? 50K or something silly, so that's under construction. That's why people sometimes forget that new approvals and what's that's definitely the forecast for dwellings in the future is really low. They can't sell them at the moment, right? But we did a lot of people signed up for a lot of contracts in that sort of COVID time that sounds like they're still working their way through. I guess it's with Perth. I think ultimately that rental crisis isn't everywhere. I guess with Canberra, I don't think it's rental prices are starting to ease, vacancies are going up. Hobart, but a rental crisis does, I think, lead to a really strong price growth, because that fear of not being able to rent, or we're not just going to be able to go and rent something when our kids go to high school, etc. We must get a solution. We must get that now, because renting's not an option. I think that's one of the biggest things that's supporting prices.
It is.
What's your view on people? Because affordability is a big topic in New South Wales. How can Sydney go up? Everyone's, already stretched and they've already taken on big mortgages. I just, if you haven't had good returns for so long, you would have been a bit optimistic. You would have been the black sheep. If you went and leveraged up hard into Perth, you would have, even the people who were doing really well financially probably would have been a bit conservative and said, look, we could buy a house at 2 mil, but let's buy just a house at 1.5. And speaking to clients anecdotally, there was that real natural conservatism because there was so much pain there. So I think that's actually capacity that's available to be used. When borrowing capacity maybe borrowing capacity doesn't have to increase, but if it does, plus you get rate cuts, that desire to buy will really be a real big tailwind for the market over there. Do you think that overall the people who are on the higher incomes are really well within their capacity and have a lot of capacity up their sleeves if they wanted to use it?
I actually believe that as well. So obviously we've had a decade of poor experience in Perth, and so there's that negative sentiment. And we've just, in from a local's mind, we've broken records, right? So it's a different mindset, isn't it? We're a bit more conservative, like you said, and so whereas we're still very much affordable on a national level, and so I do feel that people are able to afford. Looking at our incomes, it is pretty much the strongest in the nation, one of the strongest, and so the capacity is there. I'm confident in that.
So tell us, Ray, have you got a property dumbo for us?
So where do I start? There's my personal ones or the client ones, but my personal one is probably
hopefully
going
your
back
clients
to your point.
haven't made any under your guidance.
Not under my guidance, but when they didn't take my advice, don't buy it as a mining town, that kind of situation. But personally, like you said, one of my dumbos, I got my property knowledge going to a seminar series and doing courses, and one of them was in Sydney, my very first one, and I got all my knowledge on a golden platter kind of thing. And I had the opportunity to buy in Sydney, but I ended up buying where I was comfortable, buying at home in Perth, and obviously I've got all my eggs in the Perth basket, put my money where my mouth is. So that's probably my personal dumbo. But
how long ago was that?
2001. So yeah, it was. I should
the home buyers.
Yeah, I should have paid this 300,000 back then.
Yeah, I know. It's bizarre, isn't it? Like I bought a property back in 2001. It was a house in Leichhardt, and what was it? 421,000 or whatever it was. It's just ridiculous to think.
But
that now
clients. I guess a more recent one, client-wise, would be how I just started my own business and more active on socials. Someone just reached out on socials to say, looking in the market, and then. So, it wasn't really a qualified lead, but they then said, I bought something. Can you tell me, give me some contacts, building inspectors and the like. And I had a look at the property, and it unfortunately had everything wrong about it. Besides a renovation, busy roads, power lines, south-facing yards, tiny rooms. And so I gave them a little bit of a checklist for future investing, and they said, so it's not a good one then. And I kind of took it back to, look, when it's for yourself to live in, it's you got to make the most of what you've got, and let's make a good decision moving forward. But I'm pleased to hear that I think that they somehow wiggled out of the deal. So we'll see how that goes. See if I can help her out.
Well done. So they went for a little bit of free advice. You did give it to them, and maybe they've taken it, but they're not coming back to say, how can you help me buy a better one? It's right. It's in our psyche, isn't it, that we can do it ourselves and we can save money, and it's like it's a bit of a false economy sometimes when you see the sorts of properties some people go and buy themselves.
But I mean, in boom times and when the market is recovering and it is doing well, like the stock quality and the good stuff goes fast, and it's hard to buy, and are you finding that's like that real desperation a little bit where people miss out? Then they buy the busy road, they buy that south-facing block, they buy this, those things you were talking about. Is that really, or people went a little bit more like, I'm not buying that because I know that tanked. I know that there was 10 for sale on that street for, 10 years. Like, or are people just short-term bias, right? It's kind of like people in Brisbane, they forget the floods ever happened, and then all of a sudden they come back again. So how's it playing out?
I think it's short-term bias, and also, trying to stick to a budget. So that's that. I feel, that's human psychology, isn't it? Short-term memories. It is.
Well, it's not even just short-term memories. The fact is that most buyers are not actively in the marketplace for long enough to see the way that those cycles ebb and flow. They're not there long enough to know that is actually not a great location, that when things tighten up, people don't rush to that spot or that type of house, for example. And this is what we often say to our clients, is like, we are in these cycles in good times and bad. We know the stuff that people will overlook in a hot market that they won't touch with a barge pole in a slow market. And that's the stuff you got to be super wary of, because in a hot market, people compete for everything. So we're always saying you got to be really, really discerning so that what you're competing for, you're going to have to compete, right? But what you're competing for is good, not just competing for crap. And I guess that when you've had a long time of being a buyer's market where you've had time, like you said, you've had time, no rush, you can take your time. All of a sudden, people aren't used to that. So, our psyches will, FOMO kicks in and we want to be on the train, on the gravy train.
Ray, I forgot to ask you, mate, on a different strategy. So this is a buyer's agent that is pretty prolific, and they've actually got a lot of respect in the buyer's agency world. And you're not going to reveal who it is, but these buyer's agents believe in flipping, right? So they believe in timing markets, and they're very much in the Perth market, right? So they move all of their clients, we're talking thousands, and they've been doing it for a long time. And they believe is that we go to Perth, we capture the value, we capture the growth, then we sell it. Now, generally speaking, they know what good assets are, right? So they're not making those silly decisions. Like they're not making.
Yeah, but when you take in thousands of people, there's not that many. You never get thousands of good assets available one given time.
Yeah. I've just set Veronica off. She's triggered her. So they're not doing that, right? So they are buying the more, the better affluent areas, and and I agree, Veronica. When you're buying hundreds, your quality has to drop because otherwise everyone just sits on the books, right? And what's your take? Because the pitch is Perth hasn't got anything long term, but I'm going to go and capture the value. And what's your take on that attitude within the Perth market and just general broader investing and the dangers of doing that? And then the difficulty in doing that.
Yeah, look, my take is short term is fraught with danger, of course, but mainly there's lots of cost to get in, cost to get out. So there's probably easier ways to make money, but it's really the short term views. Like I said, that's quite an interesting read, newsworthy, but it's really, if you can make 50% gain, wow, nice. But if you hold it long term and get that compounding growth, that's 10 times the value, 10 times your investment. In fact, 10 times the value. So that's the stuff that we're interested. That's life changing for clients. So really, it's. I can't say that I've met this type of behavior or group where they're buying big and selling big. So I haven't seen. Maybe they're
buying now, but buying now, which is it's almost a little bit like you maybe missed the initial sugar hit. And the danger is when you get out, booms go for longer than you expect, right? And then by the time you get out and you pay your capital gains tax, and where do you got to go to another one? Then you got to go time another boom perfectly, and you're too late. Like you can't just perfectly move your money around a country and just get every, lick of the ticket everywhere you go, right? There's always an opportunity cost, and it is frustrating because, on the tin it's amazing, right? They do know what they're doing, but it just frustrates me when. Even within the Perth market, it's sort of like, I'll go there now and I'll get my money, but it's not a great market long term. Well, you're obviously not betting on long term fundamentals. And why aren't the fundamentals there in Perth long term? I agree with you, Ray. I do think you've got strong population growth, you've got affordability, you've got access to Asia, you've got scarcity, you've got great lifestyle, and you've got intergenerational wealth. You've got people moving back, and so they're in the good areas. There's all the fundamentals are there.
Well, yeah, you said a couple of things. You said scarcity. There's a lot of land, so scarcity close to the CBD and the coast, perhaps.
Yeah, not between the city and the west coast, right? There's not much there. There's not much just south of the river, and there's not much just near, walking to the city. There's not much.
Yeah,
there's
just a little bit. That's the case with any city, isn't it? That's really about really cherry picking the locations that are aspirational and desirable under all market conditions. That's the principle that. So Perth has that, just like any. Darwin's probably got it,
I do believe so. I think every city will have, the desirable areas, but also the people who are doing well and where do they want to live. So that's a good way to look.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Ray. Good to chat. And,
really good
thank
chat.
You guys.
Yeah, thank you.
If you have a question that you'd like us to answer in an upcoming Q&A episode, you can send us a voicemail or written question via the website, theelephantintheroom.com.au, or you can email us directly at questions@theelephantintheroom.com.au. corelogic.com.au. If you like what you're hearing, please share this episode with others you feel would benefit. And while you're at it, why not leave us an iTunes review? 5 stars would be great. I know that sounds a bit cringy, but we have it on good authority that every review helps make it easier for other people to find out about us and hear what our amazing guests have to say.